order on Monday, November 22nd, 2021. And could we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? And Mary Ann, would you lead it?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Jennifer, roll call.
Mary Erickson,
Here.
Judy Borey,
Here.
Michelle Kiner,
Here.
Jeff Mitchell,
Here.
Michael Brennan.
Here.
All is present. You have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Okay, and we'll go to C, old business. And since we have no old business, we'll move on to the new business. And Jennifer, could you give us the
Sure.
introduction of our new commission members?
You bet. So you have a new commission member, as you can see, Dr. Michael Brennan. If you'd like to introduce yourself and give us a quick 30-second summary of all your experience.
Right.
I don't think you can do it in 30 seconds, but
No, it's lengthy, but that would be too self-serving. So let me try and be really brief. I am a board-certified psychiatrist, and that's my fault entirely. I am a Distinguished Life Fellow of the American Psychiatric Association. I've had predominance of my career in academic medicine. I taught at Maricopa Integrated. I taught resident physicians to become psychiatrists. I taught medical students about psychiatry, and I taught nurse practitioners psychopharmacology to be able to practice psychiatric services, and social workers so they could be educated about side effects when those came up and they could point those out to their attending physicians. I've been a chief medical officer for Magellan of Arizona. I was as well a recent and still medical director for a system called Behavioral Systems Southwest. It integrates felons at the federal and state level back into the community who have mental health and substance abuse issues. I am retiring, that's a better word, from that position on the 28th of December. And that's essentially it, really.
thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So Judy's going to open up the nomination process here very shortly, and it is kind of a detailed process. Do you happen to have the cheat sheet on how to do the nominations? And, okay, because this is not like, you can take as many nominations as you like, and then you can vote on the nomination. You don't have to have a motion and a second on each selection. You can do several names at one time and then take a vote on the first name
For me, if we had
that was offered up.
Okay. So election of chairperson, I want to open the nomination. And can I have a motion to open the nominations?
I would like to nominate Jeff Mitchell,
Motion to open?
or move to open, wait a minute.
I make a motion to
Open
open nominations for chair.
Thank you. Second?
I second.
A procedural question, please.
Mm-hmm.
It would be helpful for me if I knew the tenure of everyone who's been on this committee. That way it would give me some greater insights into how I might cast a vote.
Sure. Judy, would you like to have everyone introduce themselves?
Okay, we'll start down on the end there.
Michelle Kinner, this is my second year on the commission.
Mary Erickson, this is my second term on the commission. They're 3 years each.
Right, okay.
Judy Borey, I'm not sure how long I've been on this commission, quite a while, since I believe 2011, 12.
Oh, and I think I've seen you back in the minutes back in the 90s.
It's been a while.
I'm Jeff Mitchell, and this is beginning my second term.
Thank you.
So
Dr. Brennan, were you looking for a little background of their specialties or what they, their studies or their work history as far as human services?
Thank you. That might be helpful, particularly about their service on this committee, Human Services. That would give me a better idea of their positions and
No.
and issues going forward.
Sure. Michelle, would you like to start?
I'm not quite sure how to start. Let me pass.
Let's start with Jeffrey Mitchell.
Sure. So I haven't held any leadership on this particular committee, like as a vice chair or chair. But outside of here, I'm a Rotarian. I'm part of the Kiwanis Club. I am, been doing a lot of work with like different nonprofits in town. So I'm pretty much, pretty well versed with the nonprofit community. So
Thanks.
Okay, and I'm Judy Bory. I retired from Boys and Girls Club back in 2011 and was with Boys and Girls Clubs for 20 years, 10 years in Nogales, 10 years up here in Apache Junction, Guadalupe, total. I've been on Health and Human Services, but also the Library Board, Park and Recreations, Planning and Zoning at one point, or not Planning and Zoning, but oh gosh, I can't think now of the
Is it Board of Adjustment?
Board of Adjustments. Yeah, I was there for a couple of years, and trying to think of Library Board also. So
A broad spectrum.
pretty involved with the community, and I volunteer at Chamber of Commerce, and I'm just starting to adopt a street also. So
And I'm Mary Erickson. I am an Army occupational therapist. I also have a doctorate with a focus in population health and well-being. I came to Apache Junction in 2011 and have worked in academia and have done volunteer jobs within our nonprofit communities.
Thank you.
Back to me. I've actually only been in Apache Junction for about a year and a half. So I started this commission right shortly after I moved here. I only have a master's in organizational leadership. I feel bad here. And I've been about 20 years in the financial industry, is my background. I do a wide variety of volunteering, everything from cleaning up yards to, I've actually volunteered with domestic abuse centers and so forth as well.
Oh, excellent. Thank you all.
You bet.
So
Would you like
we'll
to-
go back to nomination of chairperson.
Okay.
And I think Mary Ann.
Yes.
Yeah.
Didn't you have a second?
We have a motion and a second
Yes.
Oh,
to
sorry,
open
thank
up nominations.
So we'll need a roll call.
Yep.
you. Yes.
Commissioner Erickson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bory,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell,
yes.
Commissioner Brennan,
Yes.
Commissioner Kiner.
Yes.
So moved, Madam Chair.
So, chairperson, can I have nominations for the chairperson?
Yes. I would like to nominate Jeff Mitchell. This is his second term on the Health and Human Services Commission. I have seen him within the community, and I have seen him become quite involved in many areas to better our community, and I think he would be in a good position to be one of our chairmen.
Thank you.
As I know Jeff better than any of the rest of you, and his experience with the Rotary Club and his other involvement, I know a little more detailed because we talked at the nominating committee and otherwise. I will second that emotion,
Not that motion. You don't second that.
Nope.
oh, don't,
The chair will call for more nominations.
Right. And she has to call 3 times.
This is our script, so you guys should have this document, so this is what we want to follow.
okay.
Are there any other nominations for chairperson? Are there any other nominations for chairperson? Any other nominations for chairperson?
I move that the nominations for chairperson be closed.
I second it.
And roll call?
Commissioner Kiner,
Yes.
Commissioner Erickson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bory,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Should I vote on this one, because it's me? I don't know.
You're just closing the nomination.
Closing
Oh, yes.
nominations.
Commissioner Brennan.
Yes.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Right here.
May I have a motion to approve the first person nominated for chairperson, and that would be
Be Jeffrey Mitchell.
Jeffrey Mitchell, sorry. Gosh.
I move that Jeffrey Mitchell be approved for chairperson.
I second.
Commissioner Brennan,
Yes.
Commissioner Kiner,
Yes.
Commissioner Erickson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bory,
Yes.
Jeffrey Mitchell.
You can vote.
Do I vote on this?
Yeah, you can vote.
Yes.
Okay, so moved, and
Motion passes.
motion passes, and you can pass the gavel to
Mr. Mitchell, Commissioner Mitchell.
Chair Mitchell.
Chair Mitchell?
There you go.
We'll get that title
Yeah.
right, yeah?
So can we have a motion for nominations for vice chair?
Sorry, sir, we need to open the nominations.
Oh, okay. Can I have a motion to open nominations?
I move that we open the nominations for the vice chair.
I'll second that.
Bory? Okay.
Roll call?
Chair Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Brennan,
Yes.
Commissioner Kiner,
Yes.
Commissioner Erickson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bory.
Yes.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Can I have nominations for vice chair?
I apologize for my inability to remember last names. I would like to move the nomination of Mary
Erickson?
Erickson as vice chair.
Okay.
No.
And Mr. Mitchell, you can ask for other
Nomination.
Are there other
nominations.
nominations for vice chair? Are there other nominations for vice chair? And third time, other nominations for vice chair? Okay, and can I have nominations for vice chair? I think, may I have a motion to close nominations?
Perfect.
I move that the nominations for vice chair be closed.
I second.
Roll call and motions to close nominations.
Vice Chair Bory,
Yes.
Chairman Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Brennan,
Yes.
Commissioner Kiner,
Yes.
Commissioner Erickson.
Yes.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
May I have a motion to approve Mary Erickson for vice chair?
I move that Mary Erickson be approved for vice chair.
Can I have a second?
I'll second that.
I'm sorry, who was second?
Is that me?
Judy Bory,
Yes.
Roll call?
Commissioner Erickson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bory,
Yes.
Chair Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Brennan,
Yes.
Commissioner Kiner.
Yes.
So moved, Mr. Chair. We know Mary Erickson is now our Vice Chair.
Congratulations.
Chair Mitchell, do you happen to have the agenda printed?
Okay. Now I do.
Okay.
So there's no old business?
We're down to E3 on approval of the minutes.
E3. Okay, do we have a motion to approve minutes? And which minutes are these that we're approving? Because I know it's been a few months since.
It has been, this is April 26th of 2021.
Okay, so the motion to approve minutes for April 26th meeting.
I move that we approve the meeting minutes for April 26, 2021.
And I'll second that.
Roll call?
Vice Chair Erickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Bory,
Yes.
Chairman Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Brennan,
Yes.
Commissioner Keiner.
Yes.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And then we have the presentation and discussion of conflicts of interest, meeting law, public record law, parliamentary procedure, and code of conduct from City Attorney Joel Stern.
Well, good evening, everybody. And congratulations to Mr. Mitchell for being the chair.
Thank you.
And also to Ms. Erickson for being vice chair. Congratulations. And you got through this. It's not an easy process. And we'll get into this under the green sheet, but we'll wait to do that. I'm going to start in the order that they are on the agenda. There's 5 areas of law. And you can interrupt anytime you'd like. If you need to. If you have questions, please ask. And now's not the only time you can ask. You can contact me separately if you need to. That's not a problem also. So going to the orange sheet first. Everybody has a copy, right? Hard copies? Okay. Conflicts of interest. I'm not going to read all this. I'll let you all do that yourself. However, I will read some of it. That is the most important part. Object and purpose. To me, that's very important. Object of the conflict of interest statute is to remove or limit the possibility of personal influence which might bear upon a public official's decision. The purpose is to prevent self-dealing by public officials and public employees. Where the court it is imperative that a public official have no personal interest that might clash or conflict with that of the state. So what does that mean? We're getting to what is a substantial conflict of interest. And that is a pecuniary or proprietary interest. So that's money or property. That's what it means. There's other types that I'm not going to go into because they're not very common. But why should you care? Well, that's listed on page 2 to 3. Bad things can happen if you don't care or you disregard. Money damages, criminal penalties, civil penalties, just negative stuff. I don't want to make this a negative meeting, but there are negative things that can happen when you don't follow the conflict of interest rules. Now, there's something called a remote conflict of interest. So that might be something that's, there's 10 or 11 exceptions here from page 3 to 4. That, yeah, it's a conflict. It feels like a conflict. But maybe there's an exception. And these are the exceptions. The biggest one that I've seen, the most common, is on the top of page 4 under J. That's a class interest. That means 10 or more people in a class. If there's 10 or more of you in the class, it's a remote interest. Therefore, you can vote on the item. That's what that typically means. The best example I can give you is when a church came to town. This is about 20 years ago almost. And the mayor at the time was a member of that church. They wanted to have a extension to their steeple. So instead of whatever it was, 16 feet's allowed under the code, they wanted to go to 36 feet because that's part of their religious belief. It's part of their architecture. It's part of their message to God. That's really what that was. So the mayor was a member of that church. And, could he vote on that? Well, it's relating to his church, isn't it? Directly. However, he's in a class of 10 or more, and therefore he did not have a conflict, and therefore he could vote on it. And that's the advice I gave. What happens when you think you have a conflict? Well, if you think you do, if you know you do, that's fine, then don't vote on the item. But if you think you do, but you're not sure, you should come to me. If you still want to vote on it, you let me know what the facts are. I'll put together a memo that gets filed with the city clerk. And then typically those are cases where you want to vote on it and you're pretty sure it's really not a conflict, but you just wanted the backing. So the statute says that if you get the attorney to author a memo that says it's not a conflict, you could vote on it. And then the statement would be on file with the city clerk. Everything's public. So you don't get in trouble if I'm wrong. You're relying on my judgment, my memo. Now, the vote might be void, or it might be voided by a court, but you don't get in trouble. So those bad things we started to talk about on page 2 and 3 won't happen to you. If you think you have a conflict, get the chair to say, yes, yes, what is your issue? Right before the item, or right after the item is listed and mentioned by the chair. Get the attention of the chair, and then you essentially say, I'm declaring a conflict of interest, and I am withdrawing, and then you leave. You should leave here. You should maybe go back and talk to Matt and let him, you can watch. You can watch whatever item it is. I don't recommend you just sit up there and stay there, because that's not good. Someone's going to see you. Remember, you're being televised one way or another. People can look back at this 6 months from now. Say, hey, did you see how Jeff looked at Judy on that one item? Do you think he was influencing her? Well, would you do that, Jeff? No, but somebody might think you are because they see your face. And I'm not talking with the mask on either. You've got to be careful on facial signals, and we'll get into that under a different item under the rules of conduct. But you don't want to be accused of influencing a decision when you've already declared a conflict of interest. It's not just you, by the way. It's your relative, too. So if a relative has a pecuniary or proprietary interest, and you voted on something that benefits that person, that's just as bad as if you had the conflict. And the relative is any individual within 2 degrees of kinship, including spouse, child, child's child, parent, grandparent, brother or sister, or whole or half blood, and their spouses, and the parent, brother, sister, or child of a spouse. I read that one to you because that is pretty broad. That's a lot of people that could be affected. So if you know they have a conflict and you don't, and you say, I can vote on it. Well, no. The relative has the conflict, therefore you do too.
Joel, does that
Yes.
include foster children?
It doesn't say foster. However, if it's considered a child that's been adopted, I'd say yes.
Okay.
Foster children, sometimes they're not adopted, but if it's considered a child, and you know what, even if it isn't, say you didn't adopt them, it's just a foster child in your house. How's that look to the public? You have to look at the perception of impropriety, and you could withdraw based on that also. And I would recommend that you do that if you feel there's an appearance of impropriety.
Joel, what if there's an issue unbeknownst to you? Let's suppose my stepson is involved in a business adventure that somehow is contracting with the city over something, and he's an engineer in that realm, and I was unaware of it.
If you were unaware of it, but it comes up later, and then someone challenges the decision could actually be overturned. If you can prove you didn't know about it, you're not going to get in trouble. However, if you knew about it, or you should have known about it, that's another standard that they use, that you should have known.
Well, that's kind of interesting, assuming that people are that revealing, because sometimes people may feel that that's just coincidental or really not that relevant.
I understand, however, in the law, if it's kind of like filing a claim. When you have a claim against the city, when did you know you should have filed a claim? You have 6 months to file it. When should you have known when the cause of action took place? It's a similar standard. So did you know, or did you even have the inkling to find out? So that's really the standard.
Okay.
Any
Joel?
other questions on conflicts?
Well, on the subject, if we volunteer for nonprofits in the city, like for example, Make a Difference Day, I was out there doing work at Silly Mountain with a crew, and they took pictures and everything, you know, and I also organized the Rotary Club's volunteer bell ringing for the Salvation Army. So these are charities that had received funds from the city. So is service for the organizations considered a conflict of interest if you're going to be out serving the community on organizations, or is that not?
I'd say, number one, you're not paid. There's no proprietary interest. And above all, I think you're in a class of 10 or more, so it's remote. I think you're fine.
Okay.
I think you're fine. Okay, shall we move on to open meeting law?
Joel, I had a quick question on if they didn't know that there was a family member involved in a decision,
I already moved on. Sorry.
the minute they find out, are they able to file with you a statement saying that they just realized and they just found out?
Well, not if the vote's already taken place. No, it's too late,
Okay,
because they didn't rely on the judgment of the city attorney before they made the vote,
Okay.
or before they decided to withdraw.
Okay.
So no, the time to do that is when you think you might have a conflict. And if you've already voted on it, it's too late. So, okay, purple pages. Is it purple on I don't know how it came out. Sometimes these don't come out the same color online, but you all have the purple color. Open meeting law. Public policy. It's public policy that meetings of public bodies be conducted openly, and that notices and agendas be provided for such meetings which contain such information as reasonably necessary to inform the public of the matters to be discussed or decided. So, all legal action shall occur in public. So, what that means is, tonight we have an agenda, and it lists everything we're going to talk about, and in what order. So you can't just come out and say, oh, well, I like E, but I want to add an item right now. You can't do that. This has to be published. Well, actually, the notice of the hearing has to be published. The agenda is supposed to list what you're going to talk about, so the public knows what's going to be discussed. That's the whole point of the open meeting law. Why should you care? Once again, A through F reasons on page 1. Bad things can happen. I don't want to dwell on the negative, but you're supposed to follow the open meeting law. When does it apply? It applies when there's a quorum. So right now, you have 5 members. Well, that's going to change, by the way, next year. The council, well, I shouldn't say that. On the 6th, on the 7th will be the 6th and the 7th will be 2 items on the agenda that council directed staff to essentially increase your board membership from 5 to 7. So the quorum then will be 4. Right now, it's 3. So 3 members of the board. So what does that mean? That means if you come to the council meeting, just to watch because you're very interested residents, and you sit in the front row all together, I wouldn't recommend that, because now it looks like a quorum or more of you are meeting, and you're sitting, and that camera's gonna pick up everybody. And people who watch these sessions, they get to know all of you on TV, and they know who you are, and they know you're on a board. And then, you know, you don't want to have an open meeting law violation complaint. You do not want that. Believe me, I don't want that either, because I have to deal with the AG's office when that happens, and that's no fun. So can you come to the meeting? Yes, you can. Just don't sit together, especially in the front row. You could sit in different areas, or 2 of you at a time instead of 3. But that's really the rule. And I'm pretty sure none of you would talk about any agenda items, but someone might allege it, especially with your board, because you actually have some recommending power that is pretty amazing. You get to recommend money that goes to certain organizations. No other board does that. So keep that in mind. You have a very important role for the city council. Anyway, going back on my agenda, I apologize. I went off a little bit there. This Health and Human Services Commission is a public body because it's one that essentially advises. You advise the council, you recommend things to the council. So you're definitely covered. Meeting, what's a meeting? Well, this is a meeting, that's easy. Now, what about if you're gonna text other members or call on the phone? That's the old traditional way, but now it's text or email. Well, is that a meeting? Well, it is if it's 3 or more of you that are communicating. That's definitely a meeting. And you're not allowed to do that. The public records law we'll talk about after this, but essentially if someone hears that you're doing that, they might ask for your emails or your text messages. And then the city would have to try to get those from you. If you have it on a private vendor, we'd have to ask the private vendor, hey, can you give those up if there's been a public record request? That gets very difficult, so don't create that situation. Okay, we don't have too many emergency issues here. I'm going to skip that. Agendas, I think we've already talked about that. Essentially, the agenda is supposed to be things that are talked about during the meeting. Now, there is an item, let's see if that's... Well, on other board and commissions, I don't see it on this one, though. There's an item that usually says, are there any items you want to add to the next meeting? Now, Jennifer, this is just for this opening meeting. Do you usually have that item by any chance? Because I don't know if you do. I know other board and commissions do have it, and it's kind of just like a blanket. Any other items for the next meeting? You don't have that, right? Okay. Well, then skip that. Minutes, well, you approved minutes tonight. And you didn't have to be at the meeting to approve minutes. It's administerial, that's all it is. As a member, you are just approving an action essentially by the board. You don't have to have been here. That's not required.
Joel, excuse me.
What?
But, you know, you broach a very interesting thing. We talked about the inadvertent position in which someone affiliated with you in some way is involved in whatever that process was that was deferred from April and then voted on tonight. I would have no way of knowing that. In fact, I could not even remember what the specific entities were that we approved of at that time. In medicine, for example, at a committee, if you were not in attendance for the debate, you're prohibited from voting under the idea that how could you make an appropriate decision in an absence of information? And so,
And medicine has its own statutes, and its own writers of statutes, and its own advocates to the legislature who writes those statutes. Believe me, I know that for a fact. But in regular city council, city-related municipal things, you didn't have to be at the meeting in order to approve the minutes, especially now that you're a member also. However, minutes, do they have to be verbatim? No, they do not. And I've argued with people this. I've received bar complaints about it. I've received AG investigations because I said they don't have to be verbatim. And I was right. How about that? That's what the AG agreed with me. So you have to have minutes. And actually, this is being taped right now. This could act as the minutes themselves, too. Once the technology changed, this can actually be the minutes. But we still do minutes. We don't do, Jennifer's predecessor, Jan Mason, she took not verbatim minutes, but she took minutes for council meetings that were very, very detailed. And, did she have to? No. I think it came with training over the years with Kathy Conley, where it was good to have those kind of minutes, but it wasn't absolutely required. And the law may have changed over time since the 1970s and 80s. But we don't have to have verbatim minutes. All we have to have is what action was taken, who voted, who spoke, and what the vote was. So that's what we do. And executive sessions, I think you do have executive sessions occasionally. And when you do, it's usually for legal advice. Has to be legal advice, actually. It can't be policy issues. It can't be you want to meet because you don't really know if there's going to be public here and you might offend some of the 501c3s that you're recommending money for. No, the e-session is for legal issues only. The other issues are policy issues that need to be discussed in public. And it goes back to the open meeting law, what's being discussed. I think that is it for this. You can read the rest. There's some interesting cases throughout here, so if you ever want a copy, I will get you a copy. Okay. We're off to public records law. Now that's exciting stuff, isn't it? Public records and other matters in the custody of any public officer shall be open to inspection for any person at all times during business hours. Now, that case was Carlson versus Pima County, and that was in 1984. That case actually had it was a test case, and it set the standard. And that standard was a balancing test. So someone asked for X, and now the city, county, state has to decide whether disclosure of X is outweighed by a private interest. Which has the higher weighting? Should it be disclosed because the public has a right to know? Or should it be kept secret because it's something that will endanger a police department? For example, we've had public record requests where some people have asked for the type of body armor that police officers use and the type of guns they have and the caliber of weapons, where they're kept in the police department. Now, why would they want that? First of all, you can't ask why, But you certainly can say, yeah, I'm sorry, that's a security issue. You don't get that. And we have done that. So that case is the main case on the weighting on whether it's public versus private. And we do use that case when we can, especially when we really shouldn't be giving out certain information. So people always kind of brag and they say, hey, I did a FOIA on this city and this state. FOIA means Freedom of Information Act. And they think they're cool because they say FOIA. They think it's a cool thing. Well, guess what? FOIA doesn't apply to the state or to us. Technically, it's the public records law that does, the Arizona Public Records Act under Title 39, not FOIA. However, if our laws, our statutes, our case law does not address the particular issue that the request is being made, then we have to go look at FOIA and we have to look at the cases and we have to interpret it. So sometimes FOIA does apply, but it's rare. So I just wanted to bring that up. Why should anybody care? Once again, we get into what could happen. And Jennifer gets these requests. She is her department is the controller, I guess, of all public records. Although sometimes the police department gets their own. So, the rule is, what does she do with it? She gets the request. She delegates it to her assistants, usually. Her assistants then send out, hey, we got this request for 189 North Ironwood, and I want to see the building permits on it. Okay. So where does that go? That goes to the Development Service Department building official. And anywhere else, they might have asked for what are the water utilities for that area. And so we would then take a look at that. We'd look to see if there's any personal information that should not be given out. And if it is personal, then we will take it. It used to be a black marker, and we used to black out that line. Now we do it by computer, and it looks a lot nicer. And there's these weird blocks everywhere instead of the big magic marker that smells, and your hands smell for days. We don't do that way anyway. Anyway, that's what you do. You black out the information that should not be given out. So that's what we usually do. Now, we have to act promptly. So what does that mean? The legislature is just horrible. They come up with these rules, and they don't have any definitions. I think that's by design, because they don't like cities and towns. They really don't. At least the current legislature and the ones that I have dealt with. So, what does that mean? Does that mean she has to drop everything when she gets a public record request and then immediately take it over to the other departments? Well, some judges might say yes, unless there's other things going on that are going to interrupt the operation of the city and overburdens the city, then no, she doesn't have to act immediately. But promptly, that's how I interpret it. So I try to get word out to all the departments, to the city manager, even council, that you will act on this quickly, very quickly. How long? Well, the Freedom of Information Act, I know doesn't apply. However, it says 10 days. That's all you have to respond. That's it. That's not a very long time. I think the Public Records Act in California, because I'm licensed there also, that's called the Brown Act. You have 10 days there, awesome, and that is it. So we get a little more time, but not much. And they don't say how much time, but I'd say a week to 2 weeks, and it also depends on what is being given out. Maybe they want an officer's file, and that means checking with HR. That means redacting a lot of things in that file. That could take a long time to do. especially if that officer has a lot of internal affairs issues. And that there's a lot of privacy issues. It has to be, I have to read it, I have to redact it. So that takes a while. Also, we've had requests that I'd get a stack of paper, and we have to do it the paper way too, because I get it, then I have to redact it, then I have to recopy it. That's how it works. So that when the person gets it, they usually get a hard copy. They can't go like this and say, oh, let's see, oh, I know what it says, yeah. Well, you used to be able to look through a magic marker and see what is being redacted. We're a lot more careful than that, but sometimes that was an issue in the past. And we get pages and pages. Might be, sometimes it's 500 pages or 2,000. I had 2,000-page requests once, and it was awful. Anyway, moving on. There's some really good cases in here if you want to read them, and once again, I can get those to you. I'm not sure doctors would find case law very, fun, but
If my subspecialty was forensics, I might, but otherwise, no. But a tangent, Joel, you brought up personal information. I've revealed that I'm a medical director for a system that deals with felons. I'd prefer they not know where I live.
exactly.
Yeah, so that's not publishable. If someone asked for our information about our place of residence, other pertinent information, that would not be available to them, am I correct?
Personal addresses are not. Now, if you put that on a public document, where it's an application for something, like a business license, for example, someone might argue, hey, a business license is fully public record, and that's where your office is, and it's your commercial residence also, your commercial place of business, we have to give it out. But when it comes to your personal information such as telephone number, and I'd say I typically do black out addresses. Date of birth, there's been some argument on that, oh, well, you have to give at least the month and the year, but not the day. Some people say, well, no, it's just the year. So we go back and forth on that. Usually we give out the year. When it comes to victim stuff, they get nothing. Especially in domestic violence cases, they get absolutely nothing, and they will not, because that would be in violation of the Domestic Violence Bill of Rights. So now there are some exceptions, like I mentioned when I first started talking about this. Carlson versus Pima County. The test is on page 3 under exceptions. Open access requirement is subject to statutory confidential exclusions, privacy interests, and best interests of the state. So there are some exceptions. And then you go into what Mr. Brennan said, what about private information? There's some listed there. Personal qualifying information, that's in there. Who can obtain these public records? Anybody can. You can't ask why they want it. So in the middle of litigation, you might get a public record request. And you're thinking, well, this is litigation. Why the hell should I give out anything? They should do that through the usual process. The usual process, which is discovery, meaning depositions, requests for information, production of records. That's what they're supposed to do. But the law, Arizona's pretty liberal on it, allows them to do a public record request even during a lawsuit, which I do not agree with, but they can. We can charge a fee. It's 25 cents per copy for non-commercial. So what's commercial? Well, that could be someone who, I'll give you an example. We had a case where there was an accident, a car accident, and we got a request for that person's information, the victim. And we said no. And they were just going to follow up with that person and get the business, some attorney. So that's a commercial purpose. That one's pretty obvious. Usually they're not that obvious. So we can refuse commercial purposes. We actually would have to go to the governor and get the governor to sign something that says, yeah, you don't have to give it out. That's a huge, long process, and we've only done it once. And that was for extreme cases, I believe. Okay, I'm sorry, it's almost 6 o'clock. The rest are cases that you should read, or the little briefs on each one. And that's all I have on that. We have 2 more to go. Parliamentary procedure. Well, Mr. Mitchell could probably teach this one. Purpose and history. Purpose of parliamentary procedure is to expedite city business in an orderly fashion. So everybody's heard of Robert's rules. Well, Robert, this is Henry Martin Robert, was a soldier in the 1800s. He was told to go to a meeting by his senior officer. It was at a church, and it didn't go so well. So he created a book, or essentially some kind of procedural manual. And that was back in 1876. And now we're at 2021. We're on the 11th edition, I believe. So that has withstood time. Yeah. So what is it? It's really a procedural guide. That's what it is. So our code says Webster's New World Order, Robert's Rules, 1999, but that has been amended. And that's what we typically use. I don't bring it to every meeting. The way I look at it is a lot of those rules don't really, or are not applicable to local municipalities. It was more for social and fraternal groups. That's what it was really meant for. It is applicable to Congress. They do use it, although they have their own weird rules too. So it's not always followed there either. I'm the parliamentarian under the code. The goals, there's 7 of them. I'll let you read each one of them. But when it comes to making motions, that's the rule book. And it's pretty easy to make a motion. I move that. But before you do that, you're supposed to get clearance from the chair. Acknowledgement that you exist, basically, saying, Mr. Chair, yes, I'd like to make a motion. Okay. I mean, that's how it's supposed to go. That's how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to get recognition from the chair. And we'll get into the code of conduct. You're supposed to get recognition from the chair to speak too. Now, many times that doesn't happen, especially in different board and commissions, and also the council. And that should not happen, but it does. And the chair should take control of that. And the chair starts seeing people just talking over each other, or the chair sees no respect for each other members, the chair needs to gavel and take control of that. The types of motions, I've listed the general ones. And point of order is sometimes used. What does that mean? That means it looks like something funky's going on, and it looks like we're out of order. So a member can just interrupt and say point of order. And then the chair can either acknowledge that person or not. It's really the chair's discretion to do that. Hopefully the chair will acknowledge that person, even if the chair believes, they're just bringing that up to break it up right now. But you still acknowledge, say, well, thank you for your point of order, and I'm not going to agree with you. I don't see a problem. We're moving on. That's how to handle that. Or yes, I agree. That's not on the agenda. That's a valid point of order, so we're going to move on, and we're not going to talk about that item that board member so-and-so just brought up. That's how that should be handled. And then on page 3, you did that already. you all did very well on that. It's not an easy thing to do the first time. So this is kind of a mirror image of that, although the one that, that Barb did is more detailed. Okay, last one. Council, boards, and commissions, code of conduct. This document used to be 12 pages when I was first asked to draft it, and it got whittled down to 4. This is really the council's product. I mean, I started it, but then they did what they wanted with it, and they took out some things, they put some things in. So this, as of March 5th, 2019, became essentially the guide that's supposed to be followed. I'm not going to go through each one, but you're supposed to act in the public interest, no private interest. Comply with the law, that's an easy one to understand at least. And professional conduct. This one is actually taken, I found an attorney rule that talks about appearance of impropriety. And this one does apply to elected officials also. Public meetings and due process. A through E. Well, I think the most important part of this is people are supposed to be given their fair share of speaking or taking action. They have a right to speak. Even if they're in the minority, they can speak. And that is something that's under the parliamentary procedures also. But it's also covered in the Code of Conduct. Now, so that's the due process part. Come fully prepared to the meetings. So hopefully, if the minutes come up again and it's been months since you reviewed them, look at them again so that you're prepared in case you want to make some changes, saying, well, no, that's not how I remember it. I want to change item number 4 because I believe I said this. I know that's kind of hard to do months later because we don't, this board meets heavy in the beginning of the year. Then you make your recommendation and then you don't meet for a while, like right now. And that's to swear in the new chair and vice chair and hear this presentation. So I know that's a little difficult sometimes. Be fair, objective, and respectful at meetings. I think that's pretty common sense. I already said get recognition from the chair. That's in there. And we don't have much public, so I won't talk about E. Advocacy. You don't lose your First Amendment right just because you're on this board. So what does that mean? Well, you could still speak about things. A lot of people like to go on Facebook. They just do. But you shouldn't go on Facebook and talk about what's going on in this board because that's for this meeting. Now, can you? You can. I wouldn't recommend it, especially if you say, I'm so-and-so member of the Health and Human Services Board. And here's what we talked about, and here's what I think should happen with these 501c3s, and here's how much money they should get. I would not recommend that. Is that illegal? No, especially since it was televised. People could watch it. But it does set some kind of impression on people. Like, why are you doing that? You're advocating for these 501s, but not these. And you're doing it you did it in public already, which that's okay, because that's what this meeting's for. But then you go on Facebook to do it? Why would you do that? People would wonder, and they'd think, oh, this must be a political thing. You're trying to get elected for council or mayor. Some people might think that. Remember, we do have an election coming up next year, the local election, not to mention the federal, but that's going to be a fascinating election. It's in August. Okay. Non-interference with treatment of staff. I think the only staff you have here is Jennifer, and she takes the hits, and she's good at taking the hits, right, Jennifer? But treat her with respect. I don't think staff has ever asked what their recommendation should be, and they shouldn't be asked. So that doesn't really apply then. Gifts. Well, typically in Arizona, it's $25. A gift is $25 or more. So if someone shows up here, the 501c3s, and they say, hey, we're going to the Cardinals game. We got great tickets. You're coming. It's like, well, I'll bet you that ticket is not $25, especially now that they're, 8-2? I don't know. I think they're doing very well. That ticket's probably going to be at least $35 in the cheap seats and more. So now that's an illegal gift. So did you get that because now you're going to vote on them later in 2 months or 3 months, whatever it is, and recommend that they get $20,000? You got to be careful with the gift, even though, well, Cardinal tickets, big deal, $50, $60, whatever, and free parking, whatever. But people might find out about it, and it's illegal. And now it looks like you voted because of the gift that they gave you. Meeting distractions, cell phones usually. Don't be playing with your phone while you're up here. It doesn't look good because it will be seen on TV. And people don't know what you're doing. Are you texting other members during the meeting? Say, hey, how are you going to vote on that 501c3? Well, I think they should get $3,000, not $20,000. The public doesn't know what you're doing, so they might think you're having a meeting within a meeting, and that is not good. Do not have that impression. And then you get into the wheel and the spoke syndrome, which means you're communicating with each other. That's the wheel, and each one is the spoke, and now you're making decisions. Even though you're in the meeting, but if you're on the cell phone and you're texting, now it looks like an illegal meeting, like I said, within a meeting. Influencing elections. Well, you are a member of this board, but you cannot use your authority to influence any election. And hopefully none of you will be doing that. I don't think anybody will do that, but I just still have to caution you, and this is what council wanted in the code of conduct. Communication with litigants. This one's also in there, and this, if someone has a lawsuit against the city, an active lawsuit, and they want to talk to you, well, okay, talk to them about other things. I would not recommend talking about their lawsuit because you could become a witness in a case, and you don't want that. You could become deposed in a deposition. And by the way, these depositions now, it's not just a court reporter and a few attorneys, you know, in some cold conference room in downtown Phoenix. These are televised. It's intense. They're video depositions. They have a camera on you the whole time. It's intense, believe me, and that's where the industry's going. Because they want to be able to show the jury you, meaning the witness, what you're saying, how you're reacting, and that's what will stay in a juror's mind, not a transcript. They want to see the film of the deposition. That's how depositions are done now. Don't put yourself in that position. I think for this attendance at these meetings, these are very important meetings because you're deciding a recommendation for 501c3 money. You need to come to these meetings, and if you can't, you contact Barb or Jennifer, and you can get what's called an excused absence. If you don't do that and you have three or more, you can actually be removed from this board. And it has happened in the past, by the way. I'm not sure it was this board, but it was definitely P and Z, and I think Board of Adjustment. Incompatibility of office. Well, what that means is you can't serve on 2 or more boards at the same time if what they do conflict with each other. For you, I don't know, for this board, if that comes up. It doesn't come up that often, but it could. Like, what if you were on the Planning and Zoning Commission? Say you have a 501c3 wanting money, and then they come to the Planning and Zoning Commission, so you're sitting with your other hat on, and now they want some kind of code change for their church or whatever it is. And so are you voting for them because you like them while on this board? Or maybe you didn't like them and you recommended a smaller dollar amount, and now you're saying no to them on their zoning case? That would be the incompatibility of office. And in that case, you could solve that by just not voting on that item on the other board. You declare a conflict, basically. We're doing the legal training. I think that's it. Any questions? Well, thank you for your time. I hope I didn't put you all to sleep. It was almost an hour. And
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.
Thanks, Joel.
It's a good reminder. Thank you.
And I will let you conduct your business without me here.
Thank you, Joel.
Have a good evening, all of you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
I'll see you.
Next item on the agenda is discussion of fiscal 2022-23 Health and Human Services application and funding timeline, and that says Jennifer Pena.
Thank you. So this is pretty much a high overview of what's coming before you in the next couple of months. As you know, the end of the year gets kind of quiet. We are still receiving quarterly reports from the nonprofits that were awarded fiscal funds this year. Barb and I review those and make sure that they are complying with the stipulations of the contract. Up on the screen, or if you have it in front of you, is the timeline. We're at that point, we're a little bit behind schedule, I think, but we are going to, I'm trying to move the mouse and it's not moving my screen. Wrong mouse. We're going to do some social media campaigns, letting the nonprofits know that applications are available and online for them to start filling them out. The applications are due by January 31st. We'll get into that one in a minute. So at this moment, we're kind of just in a holding pattern. January 31st, like I said, they're due. They can be submitted online by midnight. Anything that we receive after that time frame is not considered. You will look at those applications in February. At that time, you'll also have your scoring rubric and the parameters for how you score those. March, this year we're going to schedule the interviews and have them come before you and discuss what they plan to do with those funds. April is when you make a final recommendation on the $80,000 that council usually sets aside for the budget on this program. And then May, I think Chair Mitchell, you presented before council last year on the funding recommendation from this board, and then we do not approve the applications until after council approves the budget, just in case there's anything that changes between May and June. I think that's about all I have at this point in time. Does the board have any questions?
Do you have a list of the nonprofits that you'll be sending them out to, or are you just going to put it on the website for them to
We
check?
put it on the marquee sign downtown, and then Al does a lot of social media campaign, and then we do have a list of nonprofits that we send out to. Quite a few of them don't apply. Part of the requirement is that they do an audited report. Doesn't stipulate what audited is because we have not defined which auditing principles or accounting principles we require them to follow. So some of the smaller nonprofits, since they can't afford a CPA audited report, if they do something in QuickBooks and have an outside entity review those and write a letter saying, to the best of my knowledge, these look accurate and correct, that suffices as well. And that helps our smaller nonprofits that are actually here in this community.
And is that something that is, how do you get that information out to those smaller nonprofits?
We have a contact, and so we have email addresses for them.
Good.
So that's how we reach out to them. There's quite a bit of list, but if the commission has anyone that they know that serves in another nonprofit, please let Barb and I have their email and contact information. We'll add them to the list. It's kind of been a long-standing practice. I think there's only been 4 entities that ever applied because they took the CPA audited report as a requirement. And since we haven't defined which financial auditing practices we follow for this commission, we kind of have a little bit of leeway to decide what we'll accept and what we don't accept.
So Jennifer, are there any prohibitions to multiple year applications? In other words, if somebody applies last year, they can apply this year, they can apply next year, and is there any move to see how they applied those funds and how judiciously they implemented their plans and how successful they were to determine whether or not they're effective in what they propose, and use that as criterion to determine whether or not they ought to be funded again?
So there is no limit as to how many times someone can apply or even receive funding. Some have received funding for numerous years. Something that was brought up, or I think I saw back in minutes from 87, 88, 89, was the original board had suggested that the nonprofits come back and present to this board what they're doing with their money, because you guys never get to see the quarterly reports that we audit. So Barb and I audit them. We look at what they've done. They list out in that rubrics how many people they served. The food bank is the only entity that cannot provide us with a list of names of entities that they've helped. So there was a very big stress on city residents being served and that the money stays within the community. So that was one thing that maybe we can discuss, that was on my list, is to have them come back and present to you what they're doing with those funds and the number of people that they've served in the community. And then how they're finding that impacts the community. Is it a benefit or is it just a program? And then I think also a couple years ago, Mary was suggesting, and Jeff was suggesting, to make sure that there isn't overlapping services, that all, say, 4 entities are doing the exact same project.
Right.
And that they are communicating with each other and sharing their resources so that they can serve a larger entity, larger group.
But again, just general efficacy. I mean, when you talk about whether or not it's purposeful, because you can donate to something and it appears to be really genuinely purposeful, but if it doesn't serve that purpose in the end, then maybe that's something that has to be evaluated and either modified, and encourage them to do that to be more effective in their resource deployment, or something else.
And that would be something this board would look at and decide.
Okay.
And that's actually something that came up when I was presenting that to the city council.
Okay.
There was former Councilman Struble brought up some issues during the meeting, and then there was a debate amongst the council members. And I know that Vice Mayor Rizzi and Councilman Biggs really wanted to have a meeting with our board. And they mentioned that the biggest thing that they wanted to know about was the efficacy, like making sure there's no duplication of efforts. And Councilwoman Gremmel, she mentioned that they didn't want to have ongoing programs, sort of like maybe every other year or something like that. So there were some ideas tossed around, but I think that might be good. And I don't know if that's something that should be brought up under this next bullet point or brought up now, but is that something that we should do, is also have a joint meeting with the council?
So I have, not heard back from council. I've kind of hinted at it. I think they've got other matters on their plate at this point in time. I think part of having the nonprofits come and report to you, that way you can get a report from all of them, and then just have one person come to council from this commission to report to council as to what the findings were and how the board felt if the services being provided were overlapping, or if they were serving its purpose, or like the food bank, without a food bank, people don't get meals. So it's just one of those things that is what they do. That I think they initiated a new program in 2020. That was the first time they'd initiated a program in a very long time. Part of the requirement of the application kind of is that they do a new program or they initiate something new. It's kind of hard for the food bank to initiate something new. Their main goal is to provide a household with food. So, but that would be something that this board could look at, is having the nonprofits report to you on a quarterly basis, and then having you report to council the following meeting, or 2 weeks after that.
And this may be totally tangential, but one of the things that I pushed at a few organizations was whether or not there was a community garden that allowed for greater subsistence so that things could be grown and then provide for some greater nutrition that way too. Is there anything done with that relative to food bank?
Okay, at this point, I'm not going to talk about that because it's not on the agenda really for discussion. This was just that's okay, it's a light overview, and I need to be careful because we can really get into details on this. And when we just say that we're going to talk about the fiscal year and the application, we get a little sidetracked. We can bring that back.
Okay.
The CDC talks a lot about the community garden, and they just got a $15,000 Circle K grant.
Oh, good.
So that is over at, not the chamber. Judy, is it at the chamber? Or Horizon?
Horizon Health
there
and
we go.
Wellness.
Thank you.
Earthheart Park is the
Earthheart-
name of
yeah,
the
Earthheart
park.
Park. Okay, so there is that as well, and they just, Councilmember Evans usually reports on CDC and the community garden and that sort of stuff. So I will make a list. I usually send that list to the chair and work with the chair on the items that come back to this agenda. If there's something that the commission members would like to talk about, send it to the chair, please. They will communicate to me, and that way we can work on the agenda, and if we have too many items, we can roll things over, or if we don't, we can certainly put it on the agenda.
Chairman.
Jennifer, back to the application process, because it sounds like there's not a great variety of people applying. You mentioned that earlier. Going back to the GAP principles, I know we talked about this briefly last year. Can you remind me what it is is there something that we can do within this commission to establish that accounting principle so we do see a broader range of applications come in?
So I've talked with finance and the attorney about defining it. We're better off not defining which accounting practices that this commission will follow, because it allows you the leeway to define what you will accept as an auditing of the records.
Are we clear about that in our marketing and our communications?
So in 2019, when I got here, the applicants were pretty much the same for several years. It was a strict compliance to a CPA audited
Right. I remember
report.
seeing that.
At which point there was an individual here that worked with grants, CDBG grants. And so when my office got really low on staff, they took that over, and I had a list of things I wanted to achieve, and which she was able to incorporate and improve upon. And so, but she's left, so I took it back. So that's how we have the new application, a little more leniency on what you consider a city resident. So for voting purposes, if you're homeless, you can list the Superior Court website or address. You can list the corner of Idaho and Superstition and get a voter registration card. It's not like our homeless are driving from city to city picking up meals.
Right.
They're walking or they're riding a bike. We're 12 miles away from the mesa. It's quite a bit of distance for them. So to me, those are our community. Those are our residents. So service to them. I think the organizations are helping them more so. And as far as listing residency, we're working with our nonprofits on that. So,
Judy?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Jennifer on, there are some county islands, excuse me, within the city limits. Do we know how many people are affected in those county islands? In other words, we're supposed to be giving money out to City of Apache Junction residents, but yet those county islands are not counted in our in the numbers.
Usually not. So on the application, and there's an ordinance, 659, that defines the stipulations for applying for the money and how the money is supposed to be spent. So most of our nonprofits understand this, and that they will report usually just those residents within Apache Junction inside the corporate limits of the city. They're serving many others in those county islands, but because the council wants this money to stay, most of the nonprofits understand that what they do is this group is Apache Junction, so we'll list them on our list while they're still serving those that may not be in the city limits. Is there a way to account for them? No, because we are not asking them for outside residency.
Okay.
When they report to us in their quarterly reports, they are reporting Apache Junction residents.
Okay, it's just that we have so many that are either children or elderly in those county islands. And even though, and because they are in the city limits, I mean, they live in the city limits, but yet are not able to, or our nonprofits are not able to count them. They may serve them, but they're not being counted.
True, but understand, nonprofits receive money and funding from many, many other entities. So if I can get back to application and timeline, I want to be careful here. Do you have any questions so far about our application, what it requires, and the timeline that we're doing?
The only question I have is, I know you get the quarterly reports about the efficacy of what they're doing with the funds, but we don't necessarily want to have quarterly meetings with the nonprofits and us. I think that might be a lot of hardship for the nonprofits as well. Could there potentially be maybe a meeting prior to when we vote, if it's an organization that had received funding in the past? Like, can they come back and then we then review it and see how they've handled it in the past before we make decisions on the future?
So I missed the first part of your question. Are you looking to see the quarterly reports?
I would say, I don't know if we necessarily need to see those nonprofits in front of us 4 times in a year. You can do that at the city level. I'm saying that prior to us allocating funding for the next fiscal year, is there a chance for us to see the efficacy of each of these organizations that receive funding, especially if they're going to apply again?
Yes.
And then if they're going to come before us and report on it, then I would only suggest 1 meeting for that as opposed to quarterly. Because I think we wrote down quarterly reporting is what the city sees.
Or semi-annual, just depends on what you want to see, how they're using the money.
Right.
So in February, you will see the new applications for the fiscal year that happens July 1. So you will see in their application everything that they want to do with the money.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you would like to have them come back, maybe in, March might be a good time when you interview them, is we outlay some questions,
Right.
interview them, and then also see what they've done with the money the current year.
That would be good. And also maybe some direction of like how the efficacy has been and how they've used it. Like, for example, in your opinion, did they check every box on those quarterly reports and it looks good that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing? That kind of stuff. And I think that would be helpful for council as well to know that and them taking our recommendation for what to do this year.
Okay. Other than that, I don't have any more to discuss on that item.
So we move on to information and reports.
Sure.
Now I forget, is this a chance for us to talk about the nonprofits that we know of and meetings we know of?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, I can start by just saying that the Rotary Club of the Superstition Mountains is having a golf tournament on the 18th. They had one in January of this year, but we didn't want to have it January of next year because it would have fallen on the centennial, which was the January 8th centennial of Apache Junction. So we had it moved to the 18th of December at 10:30 a.m. So it's a good event. If you're not a golfer, you could come and support by, the silent auctions and different things that are happening that day. If you are a golfer, I think it's $160 per person. With that includes lunch, donation, and the round of golf as well. So that is for the Rotary Club of Superstition Mountains.
And one of the things that I recently found out about, and some of you may be more aware of, the Boys and Girls Club is going to be moving from its current location to a new location, I believe, as of January. And previously, we had been concerned about the location and it being a school, how long they would be able to stay there. I don't know if you have more information about it.
No, I have not heard.
Okay.
Do you know where the location is?
It's published, I think it's on Ironwood,
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
2225.
I believe it's at the high school. If I remember correctly, it's going to be a building at the high school.
Thank you.
Forgot.
The only other thing I have in front of me is that there's a Thanksgiving dinner on November 25th at Restoration Covenant Fellowship Church. They extend a warm invite to come at 11 a.m., 9333 East Main Street, Mesa, Arizona. So they are serving a meal. And I think also Genesis Project is serving a meal for the community. I was actually packing boxes for Salvation Army as a volunteer this morning they gave away 200 boxes of food to families in Apache Junction just for Thanksgiving with turkeys, chicken, stuffing, mashed potatoes. So it was kind of a cool thing.
On that line, VFW Post 7968 is also having a Thanksgiving dinner at 1 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day for the veterans and families.
What organization was that, Mary?
VFW Post 7968.
So I believe is that everything that we have to share? Okay. Then it's a staff liaisons report for update of upcoming agenda items with Jennifer Pena.
So at this time, Chair Mitchell, I will work with you on some of the upcoming agenda items. And my only concern is the December meeting, the 27th, the Monday. It falls right after Christmas. If you still want to have that meeting, we can still have that meeting. We can cancel any time if you decide not to have the meeting. But we are set for the fourth Monday of every month at 5 p.m. And if we cancel a meeting, then we just do a posting out of the clerk's office on the posting boards for canceling that meeting. Otherwise, we don't have to post every time we have a meeting. But I will work with you on agenda items.
Yeah, I already put it on my calendar, but I want to open it up to the rest of the commission. If anybody else, is there a feeling that they should cancel? I prefer to meet because I'm just in the habit of doing so, but does anybody else?
Fine with meeting.
I'm ambivalent.
Define ambivalent. This is what we get when we put a doctor on the council. So I guess then we'll just keep that next meeting date, and then on agenda items, contact me.
You bet.
So selection of meeting dates, times, locations. Regularly scheduled meeting is the fourth Monday of each month at 5 p.m. City Council Chambers, 300 East Superstition Boulevard. And that would be December 27th. So right after Christmas and Kwanzaa. So we're all in agreement that that's when we'll meet?
Okay.
All right, and I guess I would adjourn this meeting at 6:29.
All right, thank you very much.